Kelly and Steve walked in today. I haven't seen them in months. I can't shake their hands. I can't hug them. You know, this is all unnatural. My daughter came up. I can't even really give her the embrace and the kiss that I want to give her. This is all unnatural and disorienting. And it's not you, it is everyone. It's the condition. And we are going to have time. And the question is, how do we use this time positively? Also, at the same time, we have to learn from this experience because we were not ready to deal with this. And other situations will happen. Other situations will happen. And let's at least learn from this to be prepared for the next situation. As dramatic as this one has been. Also, finding the silver lining, the positive. Life is going to be quieter for a matter of months. Everything will function, life will function, everything will normal operations, there won't be chaos. The stores will have groceries, gas stations will have gasoline, there's no reason for extraordinary anxiety. But it is going to change. You won't be at work. You can't be sitting in restaurants. You're not going to be going to birthday parties. You don't have to go to business conferences on the weekends. There's less noise. You know what? That can be a good thing in some ways. You have more time. You have more flexibility. You can do some of those things that you haven't done, that you kept saying, well, I'd love to be able to, I'd love to be able to. Well, now you can. You have more time with family. And yes, I get family in cramped quarters can be difficult. But it's also the most precious commodity. For myself, this young lady, Cara, is with me. She would never be here otherwise. You know, I'm dad, right? The last thing you want to be when you're in Cara's position is hang out with the old man and hang out with dad and hear bad dad jokes, you know. They'll come for the holidays, they'll come when I give them heavy guilt. But I'm now going to be with Cara literally for a few months. What a beautiful gift that is, right? I would have never had that chance. And that is precious. And then after this is over, she's gone. She's flown the nest. You know, she's going to go do her thing. But this crazy situation, as crazy as it is, gave me this beautiful gift. So one door closes, another door opens. Think about that. And as I said, normal operations will continue. As I've said from day one, the level of anxiety was not connected to the facts. There is no chaos. The net effect, many people will get the virus, but few will be truly endangered. Hold both of those facts in your hands. Many will get it, up to 80% may get it, but few are truly endangered, and we know who they are. Realize the time frame that we're expecting, make peace with it, and find a way to help each other through this situation, because it's hard for everyone. And the goal for me, socially distanced, but spiritually connected. How do you achieve socially distanced, but spiritually connected? I don't have the answer, but I know the question. Questions, comments?
Talking about how many testing we're doing, but at the same time in New York City, officials told medical providers to stop testing people who don't require hospitalization because of the shortage. How does that sort of, match up?
Well, look, the number of tests will be a calibration at one point. I believe New York City's actions, Melissa knows better than I, but I believe New York City's actions was more on the availability of gowns and equipment. And that's a situation that we're all struggling with. We just are going to send them a big shipment. But I can see local calibrations that different localities are making or hospitals are making on protocols within their hospitals. But we have to get down, the bottom line remains, we cannot handle the wave at the high point. The wave has to come down. And that is density control, and New York City, give me a plan, especially to the parks and young people, and that is testing. And we're doing more than any place in the country, but testing, isolation, testing, isolation.
Is the city giving you some sense of what those density controls, particularly?
We haven't gotten the plan yet, Jesse. I said yesterday I wanted a plan in 24 hours. I had a conversation with the mayor. I had a conversation with the city council speaker, Corey Johnson. We talked through a number of things. I said, put it on a piece of paper, because in truth, whatever I get from New York City, I then want to do in Westchester, Nassau, Suffolk. I don't want people saying in New York City, well, I'll just get in the car and go to Westchester, or get in the car and go to Nassau. That's why the geographic template has been very important, but I haven't gotten it yet. We had a conversation on parameters, but I actually want a plan on paper.
This would be in addition to the density control measures you already have.
Oh yes, this is all in addition. Look, I went there. My density control measures weren't enough. That was clear. You could look at a park in Brooklyn, Manhattan. It almost looked like any Saturday, any sunny Saturday when I went. Jim?
Yeah, I'm wondering, to go to Marina's question about testing, there seems to be much more focus downstate than upstate. Why is that occurring? And are there plans to contribute to this? And also, maybe Dr. Zucker, we know the global number of ICU beds, but I have to imagine there's more strain localized downstate. So what are those numbers specifically downstate?
You go where the need is, Jimmy. You follow the science, you follow the numbers, you listen to the data. The majority of our cases are coming out of New York City. So you go where the need is, you go where the numbers are. Dr. Zucker, do you want to?
Sure, thank you, Governor. So the vast majority of the ICU beds are downstate proportional. That most of a lot of hospital beds are down there, so 2/3 of those are pretty much in the city and the metropolitan area around the city.
What about occupancy?
Well, what we have now is we have, as the governor mentioned, we have about 600 individuals in the ICU, but we have many more ICU beds. But we have to, as the governor said, prepare for the potential for many more patients to come in.
Give me 1 second, Joseph. I don't care upstate, downstate. This is one state, and we're planning for one state. If you get overloaded in Albany, then I'm going to use the hospital beds in Utica. If I get overloaded in Buffalo, I'm going to use the hospital beds in Rochester. If I get overloaded in New York City, I'm going to use the hospital beds upstate. There is no upstate, downstate here. It's one state. I'm sorry.
Well, my question was how many of those ICUs that are currently available to 600 people in them now, because with 3,000 ICUs in total in the state?
Do you know, Dr. Zucker, the current open capacity of ICU beds?
I don't know the exact number, but I haven't spoken to some of the hospital leadership members.
That is more productive or less destructive for the economy, meaning, is it smart to put Cara with me, right? Is it smart?
Strong foundation with the president who's shown an ability to help the private sector grow jobs. The second thing I would say is...
Okay, I don't mean to interrupt you, but look, I mean, we know the economy is strong in January and February, but I put it to you, sir, that the government is actually telling the economy to stop. The government is telling the economy to shut down, and the shutdown has been extraordinarily rapid. Have you got, at the Labour Department, what resources do you have to deal with these tens of millions of people who will not have a paycheck next week or the week after?
Well, look, tens of millions might be overstating it, Stuart. We know it's going to be a large number. We've been working on it hard, but I'll just reiterate. We come into this from a strong economic position with a president who's shown an ability to focus on what the private sector means. We've obviously at the Labor Department been focused on this from very early on in, for example, addressing the unemployment insurance system. We put out guidance to the states getting close to 2 weeks
what
ago
have you done
now.
for the unemployment insurance system? I'm terribly sorry, Mr. Secretary, but what have you done for the unemployment system?
Well, listen, and I'll tell you. As I said, we put out guidance just a couple weeks ago explaining to the states the flexibility that they have to make unemployment insurance assistance available, to example, for people who have to take leave because they're sick, who have to take leave because their kids are ill. We've shown the states the flexibility they have. We now have $1 billion more as a result of the bill the president signed last week that's going to help the state insurance systems make money available. We are working with them on a constant basis to make the funds available. And then, of course, we have what's going on Capitol Hill right now. I've been involved in those discussions, spent a lot of the day Friday with the senators, with Secretary Mnuchin, putting together what I think is a very robust unemployment insurance package. It's been tagged at about $250 billion. That's quite helpful. Right now, and again, it's been a strong economy. We've been running at about $2.5 billion a month in unemployment insurance assistance. That's about $30 billion a year. So $250 billion is a very large package. But Stuart, what I want to emphasize even more is the importance of keeping the private sector, keeping American businesses attached to their workers. We would rather have businesses providing paychecks. There was the paid leave law enacted just last week. We're busily implementing that. We've put some guidance out. There'll be more soon. That gives between 2 and 12 weeks paid leave for workers who need to be out. But another important piece of this legislation on the Hill is designed to give small business the support they need so their workers don't have to be on unemployment insurance. We want to keep them attached to their employer if we can, so that when we beat this virus, we spring back very quickly to the kind of economy we were seeing before.
I want to stop right there, make a comment. Whenever they talk about springing back, it's one thing to spring back on hard lines, as far as building parts for cars, or you're building caterpillars or tractors or combines, or you're doing some other kind of productive work in a factory towards building lights or light fixtures, or you're building stoves or refrigerators or etc. And it's another thing to go back and start building soft lines pertaining to gowns, dresses, nice suits, shoes, belts, etc., etc., in which the vast majority of our soft lines don't even come from America. They're actually imported. But it's another thing whenever you shut down a restaurant, regardless whether it be a small restaurant or big restaurant, and you have food that becomes stagnant inside that restaurant. That food is put there for a certain turn time. And it's usually give or take about 9 months. Excuse me. It's usually 90 days. In other words, if they bring in a fresh supply of hamburger meat, they know how to quarternize their hamburger meat in their big utility refrigerators to where they're not going to get the same hamburger meat that come in today that's going to be put on the grill tomorrow. They try to put everything in line. That way it stays inside that cooler, inside that commercialized cooler for a certain amount of time. And then after that, it gets used. it's kind of like first come, first serve basis. Whenever you have restaurants and other places that become dorm to the point that they're not putting out near the volume that they was before, there's going to be a lot of these restaurants that are going to have to throw away food. We're talking about steaks. We're talking about hamburger meat. We're talking about shrimp. We're talking about all the bare necessities that most restaurants use today in their menus. That in and of itself is going to have a very, very harsh downslide towards being able to reboot back up and go back like things used to be. So whenever they tell you we're going to bounce back, we're going to bounce back. Yeah, we will bounce back. But I guarantee it's kind of like gaining weight. You can gain weight and really not think about gaining weight on an effortless basis. But whenever it comes to losing weight, it's 3 times as hard to lose it as you ever thought about gaining it. It's going to work out the same way in a lot of these industries whenever it comes to starting back or kicking back up. It's a whole lot easier to shut them down than it is to start them back up again, because you got to keep in mind people's going to become relaxed, people's going to get out of shape, people's going to eat more, they're going to drink more, and then to put them back on that assembly line thinking that they're going to be able to produce, let's say they was producing 300 parts an hour, 300 of this or 400 of that. They're not going to be able to do that. They're going to have to work their level back up again. They're not just going to be able to be laid off for a month or 2 months or 3 months and then all of a sudden go back and start hitting those same numbers again. It's going to take a while, even though they knew their jobs, it's going to take a while for them to build back up. So whenever they tell you, we're going to bounce back, we're going to bounce back. Oh, yeah, we're going to bounce back. But it's going to take a certain amount of reasonable time for us to bounce back. It's going to take a certain amount of reasonable time for us to get fluctuated to be able to bounce back, for us to get back in shape to be able to bounce back. And it's going to be that way in any culture. It's going to be that way in any country whenever it comes to bouncing back. This is going to set people down. This is going to set people back to the extent that the supply chain out there is going to be broken in various areas, regardless whether it's the supply chain with parts that goes on automobiles or the supply chain pertaining to parts that help to build air conditioners and restore your AC units, or it's other products out there, regardless whether it's products of, let's say, sinks that go in a house and faucets that go into the sinks. It's going to take a certain amount of time to bounce that back. Because you're not just going to be able to bounce back overnight like they keep talking about. They would like for people to be able to bounce back, but you keep in mind, people are not robots. People are not computers. You just don't reboot it back up again and it's back up and running like it was on technically speaking, on your computer screen. Human beings don't function that way. And if they tell you that they do, they're lying to you, because they don't. Because once you get lax, once you get in a dormant type situation, to get back up and running again like you was before, some people may not never be able to get back to the same plateau that they was before. Because you keep in mind, you got age, you've gotten older, and someone may say, well, that 30 days or 90 days, that ain't no big deal. Oh yeah, it can be a big deal to somebody in their 50s. somebody already in their low 40s that has already had a hard time with their health to begin with, or somebody in their 50s that struggled with this or struggled with that pertaining to their health issues, and now all of a sudden you're going to put them back on the assembly line and you're going to expect for them to produce the same amount of production as they did before they ever took off for 60, 90 days? You're talking about bouncing back? It just don't happen that quick, and it just don't happen that easy. This is going to be tough. It's going to be tough in cycling down, and it's going to be twice as tough in cycling up. It's kind of like losing that weight that I told you about. It's a whole lot easier to gain it than it is to lose it, especially once you get people in their high 40s and throughout their 50s and their 60s. It is tough to lose that weight. It is tough. And anybody that has tried to lose weight at those ages can verify what I'm talking about is true. Pertaining to bouncing back. And I'm not saying that eventually that we won't bounce back. Don't underestimate in what I'm trying to tell you here. I'm not saying that we won't bounce back. But to think that we're robots or we're a computer and just all of a sudden we're going to bounce back. No, no, no. This is going to have a profound effect upon the society and how we have made these adjustments in productivity. And if anybody tells you that it's not, they're lying to you. It would be the same thing if somebody had conditioned themselves and conditioned themselves and conditioned themselves to be able to run 5 miles in a sprint. You can do a 5-mile sprint, no problem. Hands down. Any marathon. Do a 5-mile sprint. And then all of a sudden you're going to stop that person from practicing. You're going to stop that person from engaging in the type of activities that they was used to after 90 days. And then all of a sudden you're going to tell that person, okay, here you are, do a 5-mile sprint. They would probably be lucky to make it to the 3rd mile before they're already exhausted and breathing hard. And don't know for sure if they would even be able to make the whole 5 miles. And they for darn sure wouldn't make the 5-mile sprint in the time frame that they was making it before they ever got shut down for 90 days. Do you follow what I'm saying? You got to be logical whenever you look at human beings and our capacity towards what that we are capable of doing to begin with. And whenever they talk about bouncing back, it's not like a ball. A human being ain't like a ball or a computer or a robot. Yeah, sure, we'll bounce back, but it's going to take restraint, practice, durability, and consistency to be able to bounce back. And that may take 6 months. That may take a year. That may take 2 years before we finally, eventually, get back to the capacity of what we even thought about being before we shut this thing down. This is going to be profoundly hurtful on every level, on every front, regardless whether it's doing this or doing that. And if someone tells you that it's not, they're lying to you, because it is going to have a profound effect upon to the way that we channel in towards productivity. Yes, we will bounce back, but it's going to take a great deal of commitment and practice again and again and again, because I guarantee you that person that could run that 5-mile sprint, they didn't get there overnight. It took endurance, commitment, and practice for them to be able to run that 5-mile sprint. And if you think that you're going to pull them out of their normal activities for 90 days and all of a sudden they're just going to be able to jump right back up again and do another 5-mile sprint in the same time frame that they was doing it before they ever got shut down, you're only deceiving yourself with the majority of the people. Now, there will be exceptions. There will be a few out there that are young enough, bold enough, strong enough, endurance enough, that will be able to bounce back and still, reasonably do that 5-mile sprint. But the majority, looking at the masses, looking at the whole, is not going to be the exception to the rule. So when they tell you that we're going to bounce back, yeah, we'll bounce back over a certain period of time, over a certain period of commitment. Then we'll bounce back. And we'll get the machine back up and running again. But this right here is going to diminish a lot of that bounce pertaining to coming back. Even those that get sick, well, first of all, those that don't get sick, it's going to diminish their quality pertaining to productivity. Those that get sick and have to go through some sort of harsh conditions, that's going to be added or tripled onto their productivity towards being able to bounce back. And of course, if you put into the equation of age, and if you put into the equation of doing things simultaneously every day, again and again and again and again and again, those equations are going to be against that person and not for that person. And some of them may not never fully be able to do the jobs before they was taken off the assembly line versus after. They may not never be able to bounce back to that same productivity because they had become adjusted to that. They had become conditioned to that, just like that 5-mile sprinter. You have to be logical and practical whenever you make these types of projections towards what is happening here. This is happening on a physical form pertaining to people getting sick. Just like the Bible talks about that he will throw us off into a sick bed. America was already sick, and most countries was already struggling with health conditions all over the world pertaining to people having various diseases and having various problems, all engaging into the body, the medical industry. So to think that this is just going to be able to bounce back like a ball, you're only deceiving yourself.
As I see it, Mr. Secretary, the government wants to give money or loans to businesses if they do not lay people off, which means that government money goes to a business, they keep paying workers wages, but it's actually the government that's paying those wages. Is that how it works?
Well, I haven't seen the details that are being hammered out most recently right now, but the basic idea here is we want to provide business short-term support so that we can keep the attachment of the worker to the business so that when the economy is ready to spring back, we've got that workforce there. And so, yes, federal funds, in terms of loans or other terms, going to business so that they can support their workers in this absolutely unprecedented time. Are these things that we would propose in ordinary circumstances? No. Are these ordinary circumstances? No. They're like nothing we've seen since, I think, World War II. And another positive note I would say, Stuart, is not just the presidential leadership we're seeing as if in wartime, but also the strength of our private sector and how American businesses, even voluntarily, are stepping forward to try to help the president, the states, the governors deal with all of this.
Mr. Secretary, Eugene Scalia, thank you very much for joining us this morning, sir. We appreciate it in a very, very difficult time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stuart.
Thank you. We'd like to keep you up to date with who is tested positive, who is being tested, states that are shutting down, saying stay at home, Ash has news from Minnesota's governor. What do you have?
Yes, who is self-quarantining. Governor Tim Walz saying this in a tweet. He said, after learning that I had contact with someone who has COVID-19, I plan to lead by example and work from home. I currently have no symptoms and will continue working tirelessly to combat the spread of the virus. So there's a governor who's come in contact with someone who has tested positive. So he indeed is self-quarantining. A couple of other quick notes while I have you. Pakistan launching its army onto the streets to make sure that people comply with the nationwide restrictions caused by the virus. And then there's a report from Reuters, this hasn't been confirmed, but says that Marathon Galveston Bay Texas refinery has cut 1,700 contract workers. The reason I bring that up is I think we're going to see a lot more of that with oil still stuck around the $22 a barrel. We're going to see an awful lot of people being laid off in the oil industry, which is very sad.
Yes, it is. All right, Ash, thank you very much indeed. We want to keep you up to speed on the medical side of this thing, the drug side of it. Lauren, you've got news from a French biotech company, I think?
On the testing, yes. The name of this company is Novocyt. They are French, and they just received FDA approval to use their testing in U.S. hospitals and U.S. laboratories. That stock is up about 40% on the news. The vice president updated us yesterday that we have conducted 254,000 tests right here in the U.S. About 30,000 of them did test positive for coronavirus, but he said by the middle of this week that backlog should be cleared as there are more tests available. This French company is one of those tests.
All right, thank you, Lauren. I want to bring in Danielle DiMartino-Booth, former Dallas Fed advisor. Danielle, welcome to the program. Good to have you back again. We have the news this morning that the Federal Reserve is aggressively putting money into the system, buying some securities. That will be bonds, I understand. Is it enough? Will it work? Will it stop us going into a credit crunch?
Well, we're about to find out. I think the Fed should be initially pleased. The most liquid investment grade bond exchange traded fund, that is ticker LQD, that has been under severe strains over the past few weeks, has come roaring back. It was actually up 2% on Friday, and it's up another 6%. So I think the Fed, if the Fed was trying to put a floor underneath the bonds that we would put in retirees' portfolios, investment grade considered the opposite of dodgy credit, if you will, to use one of your terms, then I think the Fed has managed to put a floor underneath that particular sector. And you know, it's hard to describe the magnitude of the Fed purchases here. We're talking about $625 billion a week. They're going to be buying $75 billion in treasuries every day, $50 billion in mortgage-backed securities every day. And they've expanded the type of collateral that they will lend against. They've expanded the type of bonds that they will purchase as well. So this is, I've never seen anything like this, and I lived throughout the financial crisis. This is of a complete separate order of magnitude.
And yet, we still don't have this rescue package from Congress to help and support the economy. But let me put it like this. If we did get that $2 trillion package, and maybe more in the future, and the Fed keeps buying, as you say, $625 billion worth of stuff a week, is that enough to put a floor under the economy?
Well, Stuart, I would say that we were in a whole different world of pain if that was not the case. Because you're talking about a different world order. You're talking about a repricing the likes of which we've never seen before. So one would think that, because I think markets today are rightly angered and upset about the fact that there is only so much that the Fed can do. The Fed cannot provide, as the Labor Secretary was just explaining, unemployment insurance or extended unemployment insurance. I've lost the number of fingers and toes of people I personally know who have lost their jobs. I'm not talking about firms that are going to take loans. I'm just talking about layoffs, period. So I think that now is the time to say, if this is what the Fed can do for the financial markets and the banking system, this is what Congress can do for the everyday working men and women in America.
A great deal depends on how long this stay-at-home movement lasts. I mean, the order to sort of lock down, stay in place, stay in your own home, don't go to work. I mean, shutting down the economy. Treasury Secretary Mnuchin says that this lockdown situation.
You know, whenever I first come out here, back to Tennessee, within a couple years of me being back here, I started going around with a mask on. A mask that covered my mouth, but didn't diminish from my driving capacity to be able to see. I actually got pulled over and chastised by law enforcement 2 or 3 different times for doing that, for wearing a mask. They said that I was attracting the wrong type of attention to myself. I even had others that thought that I was purposely trying to set various law enforcement agencies up for a lawsuit. I got accused of doing that I was trying to get law enforcement agencies, regardless whether it was in Dyer, Kenton, New Bern, some of these other little rinky-dink towns around here, trying to set them up to the point of me suing them for harassment or suing them for this or suing them for that. People had no idea that I was being inspired by God then towards where we're at now, towards it basically becoming mandatory, towards people having to wear a mask. Having to wear a mask. They thought that I was silly. They thought that I was being ignorant. Or they thought that I was up to no good. And it was neither of the above. It was God expressing to me to express to the media, to the public, to start preparing. Start getting ready. But that's not how the public took it at the time. And that's not how law enforcement took it at the time. They thought that I was off the wall. They thought that I was crazy. Well, now, since all these events have unfolded, now we see that in reality, I was not crazy. And the fact of the matter is, whenever the impeachment trial ended towards basically giving Donald Trump a green light in what that Donald Trump had done with the Ukrainians, I said then, immediately, this is going to open up the door for the wrath of God in some form or fashion. And at that time, whenever I said that, the coronavirus had yet to be publicly announced to the general public over here in America. I'm sure that there was a lot of people over in China that knew that it was going on, but as far as it becoming public, I had no earthly idea that that was right around the bend, right around the corner whenever I made that statement that all the senators and the congressmen done by voting the way that they voted was opening up the true justice that comes from God Almighty. It was kind of like whenever I was speaking to Mr. Moore the other day on the telephone, and I said something to him about, well, what is your job supposed to be, Mr. Moore? What is your job? And I really didn't get an answer from him. So I cut in on the conversation. I go, your job is supposed to be to protect the innocent and punish the guilty. The same way with a state judge. To protect the innocent and punish the guilty. The same way with a federal judge. Or the same way with a jury. You don't want to punish the innocent and let the guilty go free. It makes all the difference in the world in the perspective of whether or not you're a righteous judge or you're an unrighteous judge. If you're an unrighteous judge, you're going to follow the money. Whoever has the biggest pockets, whoever is most convincing, This is the way that I'm going to judge and lay down this law. But if you're a true righteous judge, you're going to decipher the difference between the guilty and the innocent, and you're going to automatically go with the innocent and punish the guilty regardless of how